And welcome back. Today we are going to be taking a quick look at the MiG-29 from the new Apex Predator update. I did quite a few games and I got a little bit of an understanding of it. And I do have to say that the flight performance of this thing is absolutely ridiculous. However, the missiles got nerfed slightly, and yes, the R-73s are not in the game, and the R-27s got nerfed on top of it. So they are all pretty flare hungry. The radar on this thing isn't exactly stellar either. It does have most of the options that you need, and you do have the helmet mounted display, which you can slave your missiles to. But in general, this plane does kind of suffer from the fact that the missiles are fairly easy to dodge. The R-27T, you drop one flare, it's gone. Even in the rear aspect, it's not going to be tracking. I am kind of expecting them to get buffed somewhat in the near future, because right now they perform almost worse than the R-24s do. The R-60Ms, we are all very familiar with. And then you have the R-27R. Now the issue is not so much the missile. It tracks quite nicely, it's pretty nimble, and you can't of course use countermeasures versus it. The issue is that the radar of this thing is very finicky. It likes to lock onto everything that you don't want to lock onto. But in general, this thing is kind of carried by the absolutely ridiculous flight performance together with the gun. The gun is great, but of course you're not going to get many kills with it. The issue with this thing is simply your early game presence. It's a little bit like the J7E. It's a little bit like something like a Kafir. It's not there. You're not going to be doing much at the early game very often. You might be able to get some kills in. You might be able to kind of look around for stragglers, but you don't want to be in the big ass furball. You are kind of struggling. The nice thing here is you do get large countermeasures. You do have 60 of them. I run mixed. You only get 15 pops. Do be very sparingly with them. You will be running out very, very quickly. Before we get started today, thank you to all my patrons and my YouTube members and everyone looking to buy this absolute fantastic decal that's on the right of your screen right there. You can do so by using my discount code down below. But without further ado, let's get right into the gameplay. And before we get started, everyone looking for the F-16, I will probably upload this tomorrow, and is basically the polar opposite of this vehicle right here. A little bit worse acceleration, pulls a lot less, it's much less dependent on its flight performance and much more on its missile and its radar set. The AIM-7F right now is basically a carbon copy of the AIM-7F, so you don't have to worry too much about it, but together with the radar that it has, it is virtually impossible to notch, and you'll see this tomorrow in the F-16 video, but it's pretty damn nasty. And the AIM-9Ls, of course, much better range, much more flare resistance, which are the main drawbacks of the R60s that you have on this vehicle right here. But you can see that I'm kind of trying to stick with my team. I'm trying to not run into the enemy blob on my own, because you're not going to be surviving. The plane is amazing. You have good acceleration, you have good flight performance to get basically out of most of the situation that you will find yourself in. The issue is just you don't have too many flares. And you are pretty big, like you're pretty easy to hit with guns even, because you're just a massive target. It's a bit like when you fly the F-14. So we come in here, we lock him up at the IRST, because it's a slightly smaller ACM profile. We switch to the normal radar. Boom, he is crit. He's not going to have a very great time with that one. And then I see the furball directly ahead of me, and I'm not going to fly directly into it. I'm going to try to scour around the edges here, and make sure that I don't get swamped, because that's the last thing you want in top tier. You want to make sure that most of the enemies are on the same angle of your camera, so you can observe most people at once. F5 coming in, not feeling very good with that, because there's also missiles coming at me from the right. Not sure if it's at the Su-17 or if it's at me. There's also people above me, so I'm gonna disengage for a little while and then come back and see what it's like. What is the game progressing like? Who can I engage? J7D coming head on with me. He's not pre-flaring. He gets kind of close, so I just switch to an R60 to, well, make sure it pulls a little bit harder. Shoot it last second, and he actually doesn't flare it. Now the rest of the game is looking kind of spicy. I go for the MiG-29. He's high, he's low, he's alone. Most likely to hit, but he does flare it. FRE pulls ahead of us. I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna be able to kill him right there. I need to get these numbers down. And now the real flight performance show starts, because, well, when everyone is looking around, very unlikely to hit any of these missiles on them. So everyone gets on my 6. I do have a teammate around, and I need to kind of make sure that I can actually do something. F4J is flying away from us, and the F5Es are on our 6. The issue is with the F5Es, they maintain their speed very well at around Mach 1. They're very hard to out-accelerate, they're very hard to out-energy in this state. But the MiG-29 that we missed beforehand is now on our 6, together with 2 F5Es. The F4J, however, is flying towards the MiG-23 that just killed the other guy that was alone. So it's basically a 3v1 here. I notice one breaks off. It's going to give us a little bit of room. And I'm going to be taking the opportunity here to see if I can stall any of these out. The MiG-29, not really too worried about it. He doesn't hold enough energy to really do anything about us. And he only has R60, so we are just going to be able to flare them rather easily. I lose one of the F5s, there he is. And I notice him just in time to extend away again. This is the strength of the MiG-29. Being wary of missiles. Don't want to afterburn too hard. Have afterburner for a little bit. I'm fast enough as it is. But I want these guys to commit to me so that they all lose their speed at once. Because I'm not going to be dealing with 3 people that hold their energy. If I then start turn fighting, I'm just basically flopping my dick in the wind. You're gonna just run out of energy and you are gonna be a very easy target once you're slow in this thing. Of course, if you go slow together, if you force a fight like that, you're gonna be completely okay. But I notice that the F5, the Chinese one here, is flying it pretty well, but then he goes head on. And now I'm on the 6th of one of them. I have 3 missiles left, so I'm just gonna fire it. And then I switch on over to the F5. Here's where the gun comes in. Angle the plane a little bit so that the gun is in the middle of my screen, makes it a little bit easier to aim. We shoot a 30 mil right in his nose and down he goes. And now we can dogfight a MiG-21. And the MiG-29, it just doesn't have the energy to do this, so we simply turn into him without much issue. We missed the first shot and he turns right back into us. Down he goes and that's GG. And very quickly, let me demonstrate to you how the R-27s behave. So what you can do is you can use your IRST to slave the missiles, and most of you guys that have flown a MiG-23 MLD and stuff like that, you already know how this works, but I just use it to find targets. We find a guy, it's 20 kilometers away, and I'm just kind of waiting for now to get him a little bit closer. I don't want to shoot a missile from this far out because it's simply too likely to miss. You might get some very nasty long range shots, and looking at his trajectory, it probably would have hit, but hey, I'd rather be consistent other than get some stupid long range kills, because I in the end play this game to have fun, and I have the most fun trying to carry and getting some wins in. So MiG-29 gets locked up, he doesn't get any warning for this, and that R-27 is just chonking along on his merry way, and that MiG-29 gives him a nice fat broadside, and it goes right into his plane. He turns into a fireball and we go on to the next one, and then we notice the MiG-23 and we're going head on with him. He definitely sees us, so shooting an R-27 R at this point is a much better option. He's not going to be fast enough to dodge that, not fast enough to notch, and well, the chaff doesn't really do anything versus that. We lock him up, and I can use again the IR one, but at these speeds, he essentially, I know that he's going to be seeing it, and it's too likely for him to flare it. So we push ahead on, too slow to chaff, won't work anyway, and too slow to notch, so he also eats the missile right in his face. And for what kind of scenarios would you like something like the R-27T? Well, these I like the most. Side aspect, preferably from above or below. And if the enemy doesn't flare for someone else, and I was kind of pinching my ass cheeks because you saw that he started to flare. I think that was for the actual enemy that was on the 6 or my teammate, because he was looking at someone else. And these kind of top attack angles, same deal as when you use something like the PL5Bs if you are used to them. Pretty good for shooting from angles where there is no one around, and if you have no teammates around you and you simply shoot it from above, a little bit behind maybe, a little bit in front maybe, it doesn't really matter as long as you shoot it from angles where they shouldn't be really looking. And you can't look everywhere. You can be an absolute owl on Adderall and just spin your head like 7,000 degrees. You are still going to be missing some angles, and if that diamond goes out, if the missile runs out of engine, then guess what? It's kind of just coming in blind, and it's very, very dangerous when it comes in like that. So again, what do? We kind of stay on the sides here, we drop the fuel tank, and the fuel tank is an absolute blessing on this and the F-16. They burn fuel quite rapid, and without the fuel tank you are essentially useless. You are not forced to run max fuel with it, which I think is both a good and a bad thing. Because, well, they can force people to simply run a very low fuel amount, use the tank to get around, and then drop it once you get on someone's 6. And just focus the ever-living shit out of them. But that's also going to get yourself killed. You're just getting both of yourself killed. So, MiG-23, we launch right on top of him. And that's going to be a very easy track. And I want to shoot at people that are kind of isolated. If this guy was a little bit further back, I would have had a much better time killing him. The missile's in the air for such a long time that if he starts engaging someone else, he's very likely going to be flaring their missile. He's very likely to get shot at as well. And he's going to be taking evasive action. And he is then accidentally going to end up dodging your missile, which is the annoying part. That's why I would like to shoot more people like this. He's completely alone, he's not engaging anyone, and he's not going to be looking up. And he absolutely eats that missile right in the cockpit. So use these missiles sparingly. Try to use them on people that aren't really looking around, people that are not getting shot at by someone else. Because if you shoot an R27 at someone, that's going to be a 100% shot if he doesn't see it. If he gets shot at by someone else, he's very likely going to be flaring their missile, and in turn it's going to make your missile miss. And that's just a shame, because they can be pretty powerful. We then go for the MiG-23, we line up the shot, we squeeze the trigger, we have some bad lag, and he kind of blows up a little bit later. We don't get the kill, don't ask me why, and then flare a friendly's missile, because I'm not feeling the team kill. Because I've been team killed, what, I think 6 times or something. Not exactly enjoyable. Twice on takeoff, 2 times in a mid-dogfight, and then another one where I... Well, one, he couldn't really help it, he shot it, and the missile did a 180 for me. I think, oh, it's 5 actually. Not very enjoyable. You need to be vigilant of every missile, even the ones without the diamond, even though they might be burning, which just indicates that they are from a friendly. We go head on with an EJ Kai. I'm not even going to push the head on because I'm not feeling that aim 7. I break off and we switch on over towards the MiG-23. We get on the guy 6. We don't miss, he gets some lag again and he simply blows up. And then we disengage again and go for the next MiG-23. And I hope that one time I will not lag too bad and I will actually be able to get the kill for it. So we're pushing after the MiG-23 now. The game is basically over, and this is most of your games. You don't have the much game impact until a little bit later game. Not sure how that tracked, but our 60Ms just sometimes like to track. Razor gets a Yak-28 kill in the background on an F4E. Shame on that guy, but it's pretty funny nonetheless. We shoot a missile off. It's going to be basically the last guy of the match. And if he's not going to be flaring it, he is going to be dying. So we go down. We squeeze the trigger and we take his wing off. And as I said before, this gun is pretty damn goated. They did remove the trigger delay that it used to have with the MiG-27 gun rework basically. On the dev server this thing got the MiG-27 gun, except they just lowered the RPM. So it still had that spool up time, which to be honest it shouldn't have regardless, because well, it should spool up once you enter combat. At least the Vulcan does. I'm not too sure if it does for the GSH 30-6, but I'm assuming it does because well, I don't know actually. It might not because it's actually used for ground target. But I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me, even if I didn't ask for it. So feel free to tell me, because I honestly just have no clue. So what do we do again? Well, MiG-29, of course. He's just waiting for targets really. The start of the game is kind of boring with this thing, because you are not able to contest in the same way in the head-ons that you can with something like the F-16, for example. Once you get past the head-on, this thing is absolutely nasty, but you have to get there first. And everyone is going to be spamming radar missiles at you. And especially if you take a little bit of altitude like I am right here, it's just not a very enjoyable experience. I'm not a big fan of the MiG-29. It's a great plane, don't get me wrong. It's simply the missiles. And everyone's saying, well, no, you're probably coping that the R-73s are good. No, I'm not, because I know that I also have to fly against those missiles. If it was like in the first dev server, it probably would have been fine. They were pretty flammable, but they had a little bit more range, a little bit more agility, and of course the off-board capabilities. The thing is that they would also miss on the roads, whereas the R60s, they hit very often. Like if they are not doing some absolute bullshit, they will not miss on their own. The R73s were very unreliable in both the first and the second dev server. Or the second update, sure, they were basically unflareable. Well, they were literally unflareable. You could dodge them, but you couldn't flare them, which I think is beyond bullshit, especially considering how cluttered Toptier is. Because very often, you're not going to be able to see the missile that Mr. Goodwin just shot on my 6. When I'm talking about the R27s, where you actually have to put some thought into who you're going to shoot it at, even though you have a pretty good shot, because all the teammates might flare them, those missiles are essentially going to kill everyone, because you are not able to look at every missile that comes your way. Pre-flaring and just flaring in case someone shoots a missile at you because you have an idea of a feeling that someone is shooting at you is not going to work. You need to actually see every missile then, or at least every R73, and you will need to actually see them all and start dodging them like you don't have flares, which I think is beyond bullshit, because the missiles you are seeing me shoot with the R27 top down, where the enemy kind of flares and they kind of just had an idea or they were flaring another missile, that won't happen anymore. And then I will say that the R73, like the one on the second dev, is almost better than the R27T. Not like the R27T on the first dev and the second dev, because they were basically unflareable as well. I think flares need to work. There needs to be a little bit of a, I press a button, I live, I don't think is great. It kind of is like that versus R60s. But I don't think that making flares essentially useless is a great plan either, because what ends up happening is everyone's gonna shoot their missiles off at everyone because they know the flares don't work, and if someone is kinda slow, they simply just die. You're just removing even more and more of the combat at top tier, because the better you make these missiles and the more about missiles you make this game, and I know that's what it's like in real life, but we are not playing real life, or kinda are, but we're not flying in real life. We're trying to have an enjoyable experience, and if you want to simply click on people, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I don't think it's good for gameplay. Sure, it will net you more kills. Sure, if you get in that position where you can shoot 6 missiles in 6 seconds in a furball and it's going to hit everyone and get that 6 times multi-strike, that's a massive dopamine rush, and yes, it's going to be great. It's going to be a great clip, you're going to make a YouTube short out of it and get 200,000 views. But how often is that going to happen? How often are you going to be killed by a missile like that because you were flaring, and guess what? It didn't do anything. It's just frustrating 9 out of 10 times. Sure, you will get funny moments out of it, but you have to keep in mind, people, you're not the only one that's in that boat. And a lot of you guys say, well, I'll just properly dodge them. But a lot of you guys are not able to survive every match, despite the fact that the flares are broken overpowered according to you guys. I don't know how that works. And to everyone telling me, when did you complain about the F-14? Well, I did actually for 6 months. Before that, I complained about the MLD, which was facing F4Es, which was unbalanced. Before that, I was complaining about the F4E against the MiG-29 bis. Then I complained about the MiG-29 bis against the F4E, because the MiG-21 was just much better. Before that, I was complaining about the MiG-19 being on top. Before that, I was complaining about the CL-13 and the F-40 being on top. We are not simping for particular nations here. I'm just trying to have a working game. Rant over, I don't want to go too far into it. Also, SAMSAs look to be pretty shit now, which I think is a pretty welcome addition. That's the MiG-29. See you all tomorrow with an F-16 video.